Chapter 41-41. Secluded Palace Lord's body stiffened slightly. It was obvious that the palace master of the Linglong Palace knew him and knew his identity, as well as some matters regarding the gloomy palace. But the eyes under the black robe flickered slightly when it met with Linglong Palace Lord's. But he still didn't move away. Like a towering mountain, he blocked Yi Qing Luo's way. Secluded Palace Lord? Third Judicial Officer opened his mouth in astonishment as he sized up the man in black robe. In the depths of his eyes, there was a strange glint darting about. Linglong Palace Lord's red lips curled as she said word by word, "On account that you're the Palace Lord of Secluded Palace, if you leave now, I can let you off. But Miss Yi, you absolutely cannot leave Linglong Palace Lord." Secluded Palace Lord's voice was gloomy and cold as black chi revolved around him. "If we leave, we can only leave together." Ha ha ha. Palace Lord of Secluded Palace, have you forgotten that the lady you're protecting behind already has the overlord? You're risking your life for her. Will she be touched because of this? Linglong Palace Lord's eyes were slightly cold as his vision slowly shifted onto Yi Qing Luo. Secluded Palace Lord's body tensed up as he glanced sideways at the young lady behind him. He stretched out his hand towards her. "I'll bring you away." The hand under the black robe was long and slender with a thick callus on it. When it stretched out towards Yi Qing Luo, it was slightly trembling. Yi Qing Luo slowly raised her hand. His head immediately lifted up, apparently because Yi Qing Luo took the initiative to stretch out her hand. He became excited. If his head wasn't covered by the black robe, she would probably be able to see his pair of glowing eyes. But Yi Qing Luo didn't place her hand on his hand. But it moved upwards. She put her hand on his arm. Gently, she pushed it aside. The young lady's lips curled into a faint smile. Her long and narrow eyes were curved as a hint of ridicule was outlined in her eyes. "No need, we can't leave." She laughed lightly as there wasn't much worry in her tone. The palace master of the Netherworld Palace looked at his hand that was pushed away and stared at it blankly. "As long as you are willing, even if it takes my life, I will send you out safely." "You still don't understand?" Yi Qing Luo's gaze went past him, meeting Linglong Palace Lord's gaze. When their eyes met, the energy between the two of them skyrocketed. The girl's red clothes fluttered, and her eyes were full of flirtatious and domineering aura. Even if he was not as old as the Linglong Palace Lord. In terms of imposing manner, she did not lose out to the Linglong Palace Master. "What do you mean?" The Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace didn't understand what Yi Qing Luo meant. Yi Qing Luo lazily raised her lower lip as her expression was extremely sloppy. Her gaze swept over the Linglong Palace Master and the two judicial officials, and she chuckled. "From the very beginning, the Linglong Palace Master knew of your existence. If I'm not mistaken, the Palace Master must have mistaken you for Xian from the very beginning." Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as she looked at Linglong Palace Lord in a languid and teasing manner. "Am I right?" Linglong Palace Lord didn't say a word. Yi Qing Luo continued, "Since yesterday, when Wu Fu, and Hall Master Wu Yen failed to find trouble and instead suffered a loss, you were already unhappy with me. But because you thought that the person hiding in the dark was the Overlord, so on the surface, you didn't dare to go against me, and even followed my suggestions time and time again, right?" Chapter 41-42. Yesterday, the timing when she sensed the presence of the Linglong Palace Lord was a little too coincidental. According to the Linglong Palace Lord's words, she said that she had been there ever since Wu Fu found trouble. Before Wu Fu found trouble, the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace had appeared in her room. So there was a possibility that the Linglong Palace Lord knew that there was a second person in her room. So she hid in the dark, wanting to know if the person in the dark was Dmo Xian. But unexpectedly, before the person in the dark appeared. However, when Wu Fu came looking for trouble for no reason, she beat him up and almost lost her life. As the Linglong Palace Lord, she had no choice but to show herself. After that, she arranged for her to stay in the room next to the judicial courtyard. Wasn't it to confirm who the person hiding in the dark was? So what if you know? The Linglong Palace Lord didn't refute, but smiled faintly. Since you've confirmed that the Overlord is not by your side, and everything has been seen through by you, then there's no need to continue this show. Finally going to reveal your true face? Yi Qing Luo wasn't shocked or flustered at all, only smiling at the Linglong Palace Lord. Heh, looks like you already know the reason why I left you in the Linglong Palace. The Linglong Palace Lord sneered. Yi Qing Luo touched her chin. I'm very curious, why me? Because, your body, is just suitable. A trace of madness flashed past the Linglong Palace Lord's eyes. As long as you take over this Palace Lord's position, this Palace Lord will be free. When she said the last two words, the Linglong Palace Lord's face was twisted. That was a kind of craziness that she had been chasing for a long time. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows. Body just suitable? It was indeed as what Old Lai and the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace said. The Linglong Palace Lord's target was a compatible body. The Linglong Palace Lord's motive was really to make her the next Linglong Palace Lord. Moreover, it seemed that becoming the Linglong Palace Lord wasn't as glamorous as it seemed on the surface. Freedom? The Linglong Palace Lord's freedom was restricted? Yi Qing Luo, the surrounding area is filled with our Linglong Palace Lord's men. As long as the Overlord didn't rush over yesterday, he has no way to enter Linglong Palace Lord to save you. The smile on the face of the Linglong Palace Master's face deepened. Her tone was sinister as she said, accept reality obediently. If you struggle and get hurt, you'll be the one suffering. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneered, you can try. You can't touch her at all. The Linglong Palace Master gave him a stern look and warned, remember your status. You and her are on opposing sides. This has nothing to do with you. The Palace Master of Gloomy Palace said coldly, if you want to touch her, ask me first. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace did not back down. Her expression became solemn and dignified. She narrowed her eyes and said, the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace has decided to become enemies with the Linglong Palace? He raised his head up high as his slender figure stood in front of Yi Qing Luo, not moving at all. He used his actions to express his meaning. His expression turned cold as he waved his arm. Since the Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace wants to show off in front of the beauty, then this Palace Lord shall fulfill your hero's wish to save the beauty. Outside the door, 10 over-aggressive female disciples rushed in. Linglong Palace Lord's disciples who were dressed in lotus green robes filled their eyes. Chapter 41-43. Linglong Palace Lord's words had just landed. Those 10 over female disciples' aura exploded. Endless profound steps, like a surging wave, covered the surrounding area of 100 miles. Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he grabbed Yi Qing Luo's wrist and said worriedly, be careful. Just as he stood in front of Yi Qing Luo and stretched out his hand, the surrounding dark force exploded with a loud bang. The entire house, under the collision of the profound energy, collapsed onto her with a boom. The surrounding green grass and thick trees were all uprooted. In a split second, the earth shook. Everyone was stunned by this extremely destructive scene. Even the person involved, Palace Lord's ears were buzzing as he went into a daze. He stretched out his hand to grab Yi Qing Luo but grabbed nothing. Boundless profound energy fell straight down from his back. He was wholeheartedly protecting Yi Qing Luo but strangely grabbed the young lady's hand as his eyes frantically searched for the young lady's figure. He had no time to react to this profound energy. It was at this moment. A burst of valiant and overbearing energy blocked his back. It collided fiercely with that oncoming profound energy. Following that, it was the current situation. Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace suddenly turned his head back. As expected, he saw that fiery figure, under that sky full of profound energy, had an elegant posture, faintly discernible. That slender figure just stood in front of him. He wanted to protect her. But instead, made her protect him? Palace Lord of Seclusion Palace rejoiced that he was covered in a layer of black robe and no one could see his expression under the black robe. A lady like Yi Qing Luo. Why would she need his protection? Wasn't this the reason why he liked Yi Qing Luo? The overbearing collision caused everything present to turn into a piece of ruins. Amidst the rising smoke and layers upon layers of ripples from the profound waves, everyone only saw a calm expression, with a hint of laziness in between her brows, quietly standing there. As though earlier, that super strong destructive force wasn't caused by her. Trash. Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk when he saw this, as his gaze swept towards the two judicial officers beside him. The first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate looked at each other and leaped towards Yi Qing Luo. The female disciples of the Linglong Palace also followed closely behind and attacked. Yi Qing Luo's gaze didn't change at all as she glanced sideways at the man behind her. Don't bother about me. If you can leave, then leave first. How could I leave you behind and go alone? The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace regained his senses from the earlier shock as he speedily shifted to Yi Qing Luo's side. I still stand by what I said. If you want to leave, let's leave together. Their target is not you. As Yi Qing Luo was saying that, she flicked her hand to receive the incoming attack. The glower flame fan in her hand opened up as boundless profound energy turned into several wind blades, covering the sky and covering the earth as it surged forward. She continued, since the Linglong Palace Lord wants me to inherit the position of the next Palace Lord, he will not really do anything to me. I won't leave. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace gritted his teeth and spat out. He then charged into the crowd in front of him. The profound light exploded and countless profound energies collided with each other. In the entire space, waves after waves of perilous waves were set off. The moment the first judicial magistrate and third judicial magistrate made their move, their target was Yi Qing Luo. The two of them seemed to have moved at the same time and appeared behind Yi Qing Luo. Boundless profound energy surged in the palms of the two men. Even Yi Qing Luo's surrounding aura started to fluctuate. After the two of them exchanged glances, they suddenly struck a palm towards Yi Qing Luo. Chapter 41-44. Rumble, 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 a deafening explosion sound reverberated through the entire space. In the space, profound waves surged like a monstrous huge wave, wave after wave, crazily attacking. Even the sky had turned into an extremely oppressive deep black. The aura crazily intertwined, swallowing Yi Qing Luo entirely. Yi Qing Luo. This scene made the Palace Lord's pupils abruptly widen, as he screamed out Yi Qing Luo's name hoarsely. He wanted to dash towards the side where the profound energy was surging. But his path was completely blocked by the Linglong Palace's disciples. Get lost. Get lost. The Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace bellowed furiously. The overbearing energy crazily sent the people who were blocking his way flying. But there were still numerous female disciples who surged forward one after another. Under the black robe, that pair of gloomy and sullen eyes overflowed with large black threads. If he wasn't shrouded in the black robe, then everyone could see. That pair of eyes was like a densely packed spider web, with numerous black threads. Those black threads, bit by bit, lingered in his pupils. Endless evil qi overflowed from the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace. Pieces after pieces of mist-like evil qi spread out in all directions. Everywhere it went. Those Linglong Palace's female disciples who were flocking towards him all had a huge change in expression. Immediately following that, the expressions on their faces started to turn sinister. One by one, they started to tear each other apart, tangling together. She realized that something was wrong with the evil qi which was spreading out. Linglong Palace Lord's expression changed slightly, as she speedily retreated a few steps. She waved her sleeve. A transparent barrier blocked in front of her. It blocked off all the evil energy that was spreading over. But she had avoided the evil qi. But those female disciples who were guarding the surroundings were all affected by the evil qi. Their method of killing each other was extremely vicious. Just a moment later, The entire space was filled with a thick blood stench. Blood also dyed the ground red. This scene made Linglong Palace Lord's expression sunk. She raised her voice and shouted, "Wake up! What do you all look like?" It was so easy for him to be attracted by my mind. However, no one heard her voice. Without these obstacles in the way, he would not be able to stop them. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace immediately rushed towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. In the meantime, earlier that wave of boundless energy which had engulfed Yi Qing Luo suddenly exploded with an extremely dense and intense aura. Bang! There was a loud noise. A fiery red shadow flashed past in front of his eyes. It was really fiery red, it was like a flame, dazzling and dazzling. That red was blinding for an instant. The surrounding air seemed to become extremely hot as a result. The surging heat and the blazing heat roasted everything around it. The ground was littered with corpses, and the smell of dried meat emanated from them. Many female disciples were affected by the evil Yin energy. Like a wild beast, he opened his mouth and began to tear at his opponent's flesh. It was an extremely bloody and cruel scene. The first judicial judge and the third judicial judge's relaxed faces immediately tensed up. He immediately raised his head and looked in the direction of the fiery red shadow. His entire body instantly froze. That is, it was a giant bird that was entirely red in color. Its phoenix feathers were like flames, overflowing with brilliant colors. Between the spread of its wings, there was an extremely dazzling glow. Vermilion bird. Chapter 41-45. And what made the first and third judicial system shocked was, on the back of the vermilion bird, there was a slender figure. In the raging flames, the light and shadow were floating and it was very obvious. The red dress was like fire, overflowing with beauty. Totally not suppressed by the majesty of the vermilion bird just because it was the same color as the vermilion bird. The first and third judicial system's pupils contracted as they revealed a look of disbelief. The person on the vermilion bird's back. It was Yi Qing Luo. They didn't know much about Yi Qing Luo's investigation. Moreover, those bunch of rich wastrels around Mu Qilan had mentioned it. They only thought that Yi Qing Luo had relied on the overlord to get her current reputation. Although the great judicial judge had investigated the details of what had happened at the auction, he was not able to do so. The citizens praised Yi Qing Luo so much that she was about to ascend to the heavens. Although she believed the citizens' words that Xiao Yulu wasn't killed by Yi Qing Luo. As for those exaggerated words that Yi Qing Luo alone dealt with most of the elites in the Earth domain. They treated it as everyone's compliments to the overlord and deliberately spread it out. But they had never heard of it. Yi Qing Luo had subdued an ancient sacred beast as her own battle pet. This was an ancient sacred beast. One of the legendary 4 sacred beasts. It wasn't something that the overlord could capture personally and give to Yi Qing Luo to form a contract successfully. Under the shocked gazes of the 2 judicial officers, the young lady leaped up. Falling from the sky. A sharp gust of wind swept the horrifying profound energy. Her fingertips moved slightly as the glower flame fan opened up. A bright red glow encircled the glower flame fan. It was like a dazzling sharp blade, shining with a cold glint. The 2 judicial officers' eyes widened as their bodies instinctively flipped over and swiftly rolled down the ground. Bam! The profound glow fell down. It blasted the ground open. Gravel kept flying. The 2 judges narrowly dodged the fatal blow just now. However, when he rolled on the ground, he was stained with blood and flesh that flew everywhere. When they climbed back up, the 2 of them were in a sorry state. You! How dare you! The senior judicial magistrate didn't expect that his and the third judicial magistrate's sneak attack had failed, and instead, they were teased by Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo smiled as she looked at the both of them. Her brows were filled with ridicule. Great magistrate's words are just too ridiculous. You sneak attacked me and I haven't even said that you're despicable. You were just scared by my Qi Yan, and you became like this, and you still blame me? Yi Qing Luo. The Grand Inquisitor's eyes darkened. She clenched her fists and glared at him. I don't want to cross swords with you. I was the one who brought you to Linglong Palace yesterday, and I've spent the most time with you. A cold light flashed across her eyes. I don't want to hurt you. Yi Qing Luo rolled her eyes, and with a flick of her fingertips, the glower flame fan flipped in a few fancy ways in her palm. A coquettish red glow burst forth. Like layers upon layers of ripples, they spread out in all directions. Their speed was extremely slow. The great judicial officer was about to ridicule Yi Qing Luo's action. That surging profound energy was closing in on him. It was just a moment's effort. The profound glow was suddenly like a tide, madly slapping the ground. The sudden majestic force suddenly fell on the abdomen of the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor only had time to scream. The whole person flew out. Dong! She fell heavily among the corpses. Thick blood stained her nostrils. Chapter 41-46. What a joke. There wasn't the slightest bit of affection. He still dared to play the emotional card in front of her. Just now, the new female disciple was poisoned. The first judicial division was on her side, preventing the second judicial division and the third judicial division from interfering. However, this was not because of the Grand Magistrate's good intentions towards her. It was just to compete with the second judicial division. And you want to use it as a bargaining chip? Ha, what a joke. The Grand Judge opened his mouth, wanting to refute. However, large mouthfuls of blood gushed out from his mouth. The Grand Judge clutched his chest in pain, his entire body trembling and curling up. Yi Qing Luo. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace looked at the vermilion bird in the sky and took a look at Yi Qing Luo. It was until the flames around Yi Qing Luo had subsided before he hurried over to her. He had also retracted the sinister aura emanating from his body. However, the surrounding female disciples didn't stop killing each other with ferocious expressions. Yi Qing Luo kept her glower flame fan as she raised her eyes towards the Palace Lord of Secluded Darkness Palace and was just about to open her mouth. However, his eyes suddenly widened. She quickly reached out and grabbed the Palace Master of Secluded Darkness Palace. With a jerk of her elbow, Lin Mengya swiftly pulled Lin Mengya behind him. Then, her other hand formed a palm chi and slapped towards the back of the Palace Master of Gloomy Palace. Like a tidal wave, the profound light surged out with great momentum. Bang, 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 a few profound waves collided, and the sound of explosions was deafening. The entire space seemed to be distorted. The profound waves were filled with layers and layers of ripples that couldn't be smoothed out. This palm had indeed blocked a large amount of dark force in front of him. But, surging profound energy, the remnant might vibrated as a strong tail wind slapped onto Yi Qing Luo's chest. She felt a fishy taste in her throat and took a few steps back. Behind him was the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. If she retreated like that, she would definitely fall into the arms of the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace. Yi Qing Luo's eyes flashed slightly, and with a turn of her feet, she changed her direction. He was already under pressure from the aftershock. His body moved so much. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. A few streaks of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. The arms of the Palace of Darkness Lord Zhang froze in midair. The eyes under the black robe gazed deeply at Yi Qing Luo. Obviously, Yi Qing Luo could totally retreat into his arms. Why did he have to forcefully change his direction? Aggravate my internal injuries? It was just a simple touch. She couldn't even stand it. He looked at the pale-faced girl who was half collapsed on the ground. Little by little, he retracted his arms that were suspended in midair. As for the Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace's changes in expression and actions, the Palace Master of the Secluded Darkness Palace was stunned. Yi Qing Luo didn't have the time to bother about it, nor did she have the time to care about it. After she steadied herself, she immediately raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the powerful attack. Ling Long Palace Lord's expression was icy cold as a pair of gloomy beautiful eyes, like a poisonous snake, wrapped around Yi Qing Luo's body. The person who attacked just now was the palace master of Ling Long Palace. Seeing that the first and second judicial judges couldn't do anything to her, was he going to take action personally? Yi Qing Luo's eyes narrowed as her lips curled into a bloodthirsty arc. Before he could speak, suddenly she heard a sharp voice coming from afar. Yi Qing Luo, you didn't expect this, right? You slut, still being complacent. Did you really think that our palace master would take action against me? Following that voice, she saw 4 female disciples carrying a carriage nearing quickly. Chapter 41-47. The entire Ling Long Palace Hall was in such a huge commotion. The second judicator naturally felt it. In addition, the maidservant sent by the 3 judicial authorities came to her and told her some simple things in a concise and comprehensive manner. For example, the reason why Ling Long Palace Lord gave in to Yi Qing Luo was because he suspected that the overlord was hiding something. For example, Ling Long Palace Lord's concession towards Yi Qing Luo was because Ling Long Palace Lord wanted Yi Qing Luo to become the next palace lord. For example, everything that the Ling Long Palace Lord had done and said earlier was actually not counted. It was merely a show that was put up in front of Yi Qing Luo. Hearing this news, the second preceptor's indignant heart finally calmed down. She was also the second in command of the Ling Long Palace. Furthermore, it was the high and mighty second judge. However, the second judicial officer couldn't understand. In this Ling Long Hall, there were plenty of people who were much more outstanding than Yi Qing Luo. Why did they let Yi Qing Lu be the next Ling Long Palace Lord? Obviously, she was more suitable for the position of Ling Long Palace Lord, wasn't she? At this time, the surging dark force aura from the battle outside became even more intense. Once again, he heard those female disciples, who were constantly rushing towards the direction where the profound energy was surging, talking as they ran. The second judicial judge roughly understood. The person hiding behind the scenes was not the overlord, but the gigolo that Yi Qing Luo had secretly raised. After knowing that it wasn't Dizun, Ling Long Palace Lord had made a move on Yi Qing Luo. It was a mighty group of people. The dark force soared to the sky and shook the entire Ling Long Palace. The second judicial judge was excited. She didn't feel that a young lady like Yi Qing Luo, along with a gigolo, would be able to deal with so many people from Ling Long Palace. Furthermore, the temple master was also present. What kind of waves could a little girl stir up? The second preceptor immediately called the maidservant beside her and carried her to the direction of the battle. As soon as he arrived, from afar, they saw Yi Qing Luo being thrown onto the ground by the hall master. Yi Qing Luo was in a sorry state as she vomited blood. Not long ago, the humiliation he had suffered from Yi Qing Luo, at this moment, had obtained a carefree release. Second, the sudden appearance of justice. Everyone's gaze shifted to the second judicial judge. The Ling Long Palace Lord also frowned slightly. Looking at the second preceptor's ferocious and proud smile, he didn't say anything in the end to stop him. Second judicial officer stared at Yi Qing Luo venomously as he laughed complacently. Aren't you very arrogant? Continue to stand up and be arrogant? Why are you lying on the ground? She spat fiercely and sneered, you're just a vixen who uses your status as the overlord to show off. Do you really think you're someone important? If not for Yi Qing Luo, she would not lose face in front of the disciples of the Ling Long Palace. If not for Yi Qing Luo, how could the Ling Long Palace Lord be so ruthless towards her? Yi Qing Luo. The Palace Lord of Ethereal Palace slowly walked to Yi Qing Luo's side as he half squatted down, trying to support her. But it was avoided by Yi Qing Luo. She raised her hand and blocked the hand of the Palace Master of Gloomy Palace. She shook her head at him. I'm fine. I've been rejected again. The Palace Master of the Netherworld Palace sneered in a low voice, we are just ordinary friends helping each other. Are you going to reject me? I'm really fine. Yiqing Luo took a deep breath and lifted her slender fingers to wipe the blood off the corners of her lips, as she tried to stand up. But this movement. Her chest, which was injured earlier, started to emit an oppressive pain. Her legs turned soft as she staggered and fell onto the ground. Chapter 41-48. Yiqing Luo pursed her pale lips and was about to reply. Second elder saw Yiqing Luo's weak side and laughed heartily. Yiqing Luo, this elder advises you to be obedient. It's your fortune that the hall master has taken a liking to you. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. The third judicial judge looked at the expression of the Linglong Palace Lord. Seeing her cold expression, he did not stop the second judicial judge from showing off here. He already had a plan in his mind. It looked like Linglong Palace Lord really wanted Yiqing Qing to be the next successor to the Palace Lord. It wasn't just the second judicial officer who couldn't understand. Even she really couldn't understand why they had chosen Yiqing Luo. If the Linglong Palace was handed over to Yiqing Luo, can this Linglong Palace Hall really survive? However, no matter how many questions he had in his heart, she couldn't bring herself to ask the hall master either. No matter what the reason behind it was impossible. As long as this was the Linglong Palace master's goal. That was the goal of all of them. At least for now. He still had to obey the Palace Lord of Linglong Palace. In just a short moment, the tripartite judicator's thoughts had already turned 1,000 times. His eyes moved slightly. She smiled and put on an expression of a peacemaker. Miss Yi, although the second judicial judge's words are not pleasant to hear, she is not wrong. The hall master has taken a liking to you and wants to groom you to be the next hall master. This means that he appreciates your abilities and you as a person. If you become the next palace master, the entire Linglong Palace will be yours. I'm sure you're aware of the Linglong Palace's position in Jianghu. If you become the Linglong Palace Lord, it will absolutely be 100 benefits and no harm to you. The third judicial judge's words invisibly stirred up the second judicial judge's nerves. Originally towards the fact that Linglong Palace Lord had taken a liking to Yiqing Luo to become the next Palace Lord, he was already filled with puzzlement and displeasure. Now, he was stimulated by the words the entire Linglong Hall is yours. Although the second preceptor was a little angry, but he was not a fool either. She targeted Yiqing Luo in such a manner. If Yiqing Luo really became the Linglong Palace Lord, she was definitely the first one to be punished as a warning to others. Second judicial officer's eyes flashed past a vicious glint as he looked at Yiqing Luo with jealousy and hatred. She clenched her fists tightly and cupped her hands towards the Linglong Palace Master. Lord Palace Master, this subordinate feels that she does not have the qualifications to become the Linglong Palace Master. Not waiting for Linglong Palace Lord to reply, she continued, the reason why Yiqing Luo came to Linglong Palace is because she killed Shadowless City's mysterious maiden Mu Qiulan. On top of that, without embroiling city's goddess Qiao Yulu had died at the hands of the Palace of Gloomy Darkness because of her. Now, in less than a day since she arrived at the Linglong Palace, she has already torn the Linglong Palace apart. He provoked enemies everywhere and indirectly caused the death of our new female disciple who just entered the Linglong Palace. At this point, the tone of the second judicial officer became obviously indignant. Lord Palace Master, she carries the blood feud of too many Linglong Palace disciples. The Palace Lord of Linglong Palace slowly shifted her cold and gloomy gaze onto her because of the second lord's words. The coldness that shot out from his eyes. It was like frost, causing one to tremble with fear. The second preceptor felt a chill down his spine when he saw that gaze and shivered. Chapter 41-49. If it wasn't for the Overlord, she's nothing. I can't accept a waste becoming the Palace Lord of Linglong Palace. After second judicial officer said this, she didn't forget to flatter Linglong Palace Lord, the only Palace Lord that I can accept, is only you alone. But Linglong Palace Lord apparently wasn't moved by second judicial officer's flattery. On the contrary, a vicious glint flashed past her eyes. It was fleeting. Second judicial officer didn't notice it at all. She continued to speak with righteous indignation. I still have the same words. A life for a life, it's only right and proper. Even if the overlord was here, Yiqing Luo would have to take responsibility for the few lives she had taken. Following that, second judicial officer raised her chin up high, putting on a look of righteousness, as though she was wholeheartedly thinking for Linglong Palace. Third judicial officer immediately went up and pulled second judicial officer back, persuading, Palace Lord naturally has her reasons for making this decision, we just have to do as she says. You're not feeling well now, so don't stay here. If we were to fight, it'd be bad if you're injured. She called out to the female attendants, as she lifted second judicial officer's carriage. On the other side, she looked at the surroundings, at those guards who had just rushed over and weren't affected by the Palace Lord's sinister chi, as she shouted in a low voice, still not going over, take the opportunity to restrain Yiqing Luo. After she shouted this, she pretended to exhort, if she cooperates, don't harm her life. Third judicial officer's words were comprehensive. But it was like a needle, piercing into second judicial officer's heart. This was telling her. Because Linglong Palace Lord was their Palace Lord, so no matter who the Palace Lord wanted to appoint as the next Palace Lord, they could only listen. Their opinions were all useless. Her body wasn't feeling well. Wasn't it because Linglong Palace Lord took the initiative to injure her? Obviously, Palace Lord didn't trust Yiqing Luo, but in order to put on a show in front of her, she injured her. Wasn't she innocent? Autocratic, overbearing and inhumane Palace Lord. A seed was planted in second judicial officer's heart, as it sprouted. And on the other side, under the orders of the three judiciaries, the female guards looked at the pale-faced girl who was so weak that she needed the support of the palace master of the Netherworld Palace. Then, he looked at the palace master of Dark Palace with fear. Corpses were strewn all over the ground. It was a cruel and bloody scene. They all knew that it was the evil art of the black-robed man. They were also worried that they would be affected by that man, and that they would kill each other with their sisters. What are you waiting for? Do you want me to do it myself? Looking at the hundreds of people cowering in fear, Zhang Xian felt a chill run down his spine. The Linglong Palace master shouted angrily. His face was full of majesty and his aura was suffocating. The moment the Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace spoke, all the female guards felt a chill run down their spines, and their bodies trembled. The group of them immediately charged towards Yiqing Luo like wolves and tigers. Yiqing Luo, hold on tightly to me, I'll bring you out. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's 5 fingers clasped tightly onto Yiqing Luo's arm, trying to pull her into his embrace. However, his fingers had just exerted force. Suddenly, an invisible wave of air hit his finger. His 5 fingers instantly felt a numbing pain. He shook for a moment, as his 5 fingers released Yiqing Luo's wrist. His palm was empty. The person in front of him turned into an afterimage, as it flashed past his eyes. The Palace Lord of Abyss Palace's face under the black robe had a huge change, as he tried to snatch her back. Chapter 4150. A man dressed in a purple robe descended from the sky. His figure was tall and slender, beautiful and upright. His arms stretched out. In his arms, there was an additional slender red figure. Immediately after, the man emptied one of his hands. His slender fingers were beautiful as he gently waved his sleeves. His sleeves rolled like flowing clouds. A misty profound glow rippled in all directions, under everyone's naked eyes. When the profound glow rippled, the speed was obviously extremely slow. But, it was just a moment's time. Everyone only felt a burst of domineering and oppressive aura instantly exploded. In an instant, all the surrounding female guards who had swarmed over, along with the corpses on the ground, were swept away. The sky was filled with flying stones and blood splashed everywhere. The strong aura didn't stop because of this. Everyone only felt a dull pain in their chest, Their internal organs started to rupture and explode. Bam! Linglong Palace Lord's body, which was standing in the midst of flying sand, was suddenly flipped over as she crashed heavily onto a huge rock which had collapsed not too far away. Her body and mind were in immense pain, which made Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widen. What kind of energy was this? It actually broke through her barrier. Linglong Palace Lord couldn't imagine how she witnessed her own barrier shattering bit by bit in front of her eyes. Ever since she became Linglong Palace Lord, she had never suffered this kind of humiliation. Overlord. It's Overlord. A few exclamations were like thunder as it fell into Linglong Palace Lord's ears. No. Impossible. How could it be Dmo Xian? She had obviously set up an inescapable net near Linglong Palace Lord. Set up numerous arrays. Even if it was Dmo Xian, he would absolutely not be able to barge into Linglong Palace Lord. Linglong Palace Lord forcefully propped up her body as she staggered to stand up and looked towards the direction where the energy came from. Profound waves rippled as the energy pervaded. Yiqing Luo was in the arms of a purple-robed man. That peerless face revealed a kind of soul-stirring charm which no one dared to profane. As he lowered his eyes to carefully size up the young lady in his arms, that pair of shimmering peach blossom eyes blossomed with endless coldness and treachery. A strong aura lingered around him. The moment the Linglong Palace Master's line of sight shifted over, the Palace Master of the Linglong Palace Hall looked over. The man suddenly raised his head and a pair of icy cold eyes shot straight at the Linglong Palace Master. Like a sharp blade, it ruthlessly pierced into the heart of the Linglong Palace Master. The Linglong Palace Lord's pupils suddenly shrank and he looked away in fear. Following that, his body became extremely stiff. It's him, it really was Dmo Xian. The face of the Linglong Palace Master twisted a little, she knew it very well. Dmo Xian's appearance would disrupt all her plans. Although he had never crossed hands with Dmo Xian. However, he just stared at her. The Palace Master of the Linglong Palace knew. This rumored mysterious and powerful overlord, he definitely lived up to his reputation. When everyone saw Dmo Xian's appearance, his heart was filled with fear. He felt that death was shrouding his body and mind. However, there was one person who was overjoyed. Ah Xian. The girl's clear and sweet voice was filled with joy. She wrapped her arms around the man's neck and smiled sweetly. The young lady's voice made the man's chilly aura restrain a little. He lowered his head slightly and his shimmering eyes were tainted with a thin layer of evilness. His eyes were as black as a lake, so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. Yiqing Luo knew that he was angry because of the injury on her body. Chapter 41-51. Over and over again, she softly called out his name. The man finally sighed helplessly. His eyes were filled with pampering. He raised his hand and his palm covered her head. It's no use acting coquettishly. You didn't protect yourself properly, so you deserve to be punished. Yiqing Luo grabbed his hand and placed her palms by her lips. She then raised her head and blinked innocently at him. It's my fault, I admit my mistake, I accept my punishment. Verbally, although she admitted her mistake and accepted her punishment. But that expression and that tone. Dmo Xian totally didn't hear the meaning of admitting his mistake. But, when he met with the young lady's eyes, seeing that she was injured, the irrepressible irritation in his heart gradually subsided. He lifted her chin and his index finger lightly touched her lips as his voice was extremely cold. On the account that you're clean and honest, I'll forgive you. Clean and honest? Yiqing Luo blinked as she had a dazed look. Very quickly she reacted and turned her head to look at the Palace Lord of Secluded Palace. Dmo Xian couldn't be talking about him, right? The Palace Lord of Secluded Palace who was called out had originally seen Yiqing Luo's flowery smile towards Dmo Xian and his heart was stabbed. Suddenly he heard Dmo Xian's ridiculing and boasting words. His throat couldn't help but had a fishy sweet feeling. He was so angry that he wanted to throw up blood. His heart was filled with bitterness and helplessness. Towards him, Yiqing Luo always had a cold and distant attitude. Even if he touched her, she would avoid it. But the moment he saw Dmo Xian, he saw with his own eyes that the young lady's face bloomed with joy from the bottom of her heart. The way she looked at Dmo Xian and her body movements, it revealed her love and trust towards Dmo Xian. The more he looked, the more he felt that this scene was extremely glaring. But he had no right to pull the both of them apart. He also didn't have the right to be like Dmo Xian, snatching Yiqing Luo from his hands without any explanation. When the gazes of the two men shifted onto him, he was stunned. He subconsciously turned his head away, unwilling to look at the loving couple. Yiqing Luo didn't think so much, and after she heard Dmo Xian's words, she raised her fist and pounded on Dmo Xian's chest. When did you arrive at Linglong Palace? Did they arrive a long time ago? What happened just now, did you see it clearly? She was referring to the scene where the palace master of the Linglong Palace led his disciples to besiege her. Dmo Xian shook his head and nodded. Then, he held her little hand with his broad hand. If I had entered the Linglong Palace, you wouldn't have been injured. There was a tinge of guilt in his voice. His slender fingers lightly touched the Netherworld Phoenix ring on her fingertip. The connection between the Netherworld Phoenix ring and the Netherworld Dragon ring can transmit everything you've experienced to me. Yiqing Luo's eyes widened as she couldn't help but secretly rejoice that she was an upright person and was extremely clean. Dmo Xian saw through Yiqing Luo's inner thoughts with one look. He rubbed her head affectionately. When he raised his eyes again, the gentleness and pampering on his face had already faded away. His gaze looked towards the Linglong Palace master, who was standing not too far away, attempting to escape. The corners of his lips curled upwards into a bloodthirsty cold arc. Bam! He didn't move. But in the air, it was like a sudden clap of thunder as it exploded. The Linglong Palace master had yet to react. Her body was violently blasted away. He could only hear the rumbling of a violent explosion. Following that, her body fell heavily onto the ground once again. Chapter 4152. Mouthfuls of blood spurted out from Linglong Palace Lord's mouth. The ground also started to shake violently. Inch by inch, it started to crack. The palace lord of the Linglong Palace seemed to be fleeing in a panic. He dragged his wretched and low-laughing body as he swayed and rolled on the ground to avoid the crack that had opened up under his body. She used all her strength to prop herself up and climbed up. Every move she made her limbs and bones emitted intense pain. What kind of power was this? She obviously hadn't seen Dmo Xian make a move. Linglong Palace Lord's miserable state fell into the eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples and made them tremble in fear. In their eyes, Linglong Palace Lord was the most powerful person in the world. But the moment the Overlord appeared, he easily suppressed Linglong Palace Lord to the point that she couldn't turn the tables. If the Overlord made a move on them, would they be able to survive? Fear and dread eroded the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's disciples. She's just deliberately mystifying things. Second Judicial Judge's face turned pale. That profound wave earlier made his mouth overflow with blood. But his mouth refused to admit defeat. Her eyes stared deadly at Dmo Xian, and then stared deadly at Yiqing Luo, as her eyes were filled with venom. Overlord. Do you know that the woman whom you've been pining for, pampering, is behind your back, keeping that gigolo by her side? As she said that, she laughed maniacally. This kind of fickle woman, and you're still so protective of her. These 2 days, the both of them are carrying you, sticking together at all times. Even at night, the both of them are in the same room. Do you know why she got hurt? She got hurt because of that pretty boy. Second Judicial Judge's sudden burst of maniacal laughter and the words he said made the surroundings turn silent. Third Judicial Judge was stunned. He immediately stretched out his hand to pull Second Judicial Judge, attempting to stop second judicial judge from self-destructing. But second judicial judge shook off third judicial judge's hand, his eyes filled with ridicule. Overlord, are you really going to destroy the entire Linglong Palace for such a vixen? I feel indignant for you. Oh. Really? The man's gorgeous cold voice rang leisurely. His voice was flat, without the slightest hint of emotion. He got Di Zun's response. The second judicial officer felt that his words had completely stabbed a man's dignity. After all, Di Zun was such a high and mighty man. How could he accept such a fickle slut? Even if there was nothing between Yi Qing Luo and the palace lord of secluded Darkness Palace. However, once this rumor was spread out, it would be a disaster. So what if she was innocent? With just a few words, he could still confuse her. How could a woman with a tarnished reputation be worthy of the divine supremacy? Second judge became even more enthusiastic. That's right, Overlord, in my opinion, a slut like Yi Qing Luo should be killed, in order to maintain Overlord's prestige. She paused for a moment and suddenly flashed a slightly wretched smile. Overlord, the disciples chosen by the Linglong Palace are all good-looking and have extraordinary backgrounds. If Overlord takes a fancy to any of them, you can take them all away. At least, they will serve you more loyally than that bitch. The second judicial officer's words could be said to be extremely bold. The three judiciaries standing on the side were so frightened that they withdrew their hands. The Linglong Palace lord also looked at the second judicial officer in astonishment. Chapter 41-53. Towards the second judicial officer's actions. No one tried to stop him. With the second judicial officer diverting the overlord's line of fire. Why not? What's more, if the second judicial officer's words could really agitate the overlord to deal with Yi Qing Luo. And among them, who could catch the overlord's eye? That would be like a sparrow turning into a phoenix, soaring to the skies. Naturally, no one dared to say a word. As for the second judicial officer's fickle woman, vixen, slut, and so on, she only raised her eyebrows with a faint smile, without any other emotions. Her lips curled up slightly. Her long and narrow eyes rose slightly, outlining an extremely shallow cold arc. This was the second judicial officer's motive? To push the female disciple of the Linglong Palace into Dmo Xian's arms? Did she feel? Dmo Xian was so thirsty that he couldn't be choosy. Wasn't the second judicial officer's thinking a little too simple? What are you laughing at? The second judicial officer's gaze stared fiercely at Yi Qing Luo. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's faint smile, filled with ridicule and pity, the anger in his heart surged up. Yi Qing Luo raised her eyebrows, as her long and narrow eyes curved even more. She crossed her arms and slowly walked away from Dmo Xian's arms. Under the infusion of Dmo Xian's profound energy, the internal injury which was caused by the Linglong Palace lord was slowly recovering. That beautiful face that could topple cities also regained its color. When she raised her eyebrows and smiled, the red flame made her even more flirtatious and gorgeous. The second judicial officer was mesmerized by this smile. She's indeed a vixen. The second judicial officer's face flushed red, as he angrily tried to conceal his wavering heart because of Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo laughed softly, as her eyes squinted, quietly looking at the second judicial officer. Obviously, the distance between the two of them was considered far. And it was parallel to the ground. But the second judicial officer felt that. Yi Qing Luo had a condescending feeling, looking down on her. This kind of feeling made the second judicial officer feel extremely aggrieved. Facing the second judicial officer's increasingly sinister gaze, Yi Qing Luo was still smiling. Her eyes flashed, occasionally with a sharp glint. I'm laughing at you, the second judge. The girl's clear and melodious voice was filled with ridicule. Her smile seemed to be mocking him. Without waiting for the second judicial judge to speak, the girl raised her eyebrows again. Are you sure you won't take back what you said just now? The second judge snorted disdainfully. Take it back? When has the Second Judicial Division ever retracted its words? Yi Qing Luo clicked her tongue as she had a helpless look and looked at her pitifully. I forgot to tell you, my Xian is extremely protective of his children. Earlier those insulting words of yours had infuriated my Xian. She spread her hands and shook her head helplessly. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Since the second preceptor is so unyielding and refuses to take back his words, you'll have to bear the consequences. The last word, yo, Yi Qing Luo could even raise the final syllable, extremely mischievous and adorable. But at this critical juncture, in the ears of the second judicial officer, it was full of contempt and mockery. Second preceptor's pupils constricted abruptly as his vision swiftly shot towards Dmo Xian. But what he met was a pair of emotionless, as though it was frozen. Just one look and he felt as if he was in an ice house, his entire body stiffened, unable to move. Chapter 41-54. As the man's voice fell on the last word, bam, a deafening explosion was heard. The crowd only saw. The palanquin of the second judicial magistrate was suddenly torn into pieces. A terrifying and valiant aura instantly exploded. This scene was extremely horrifying. The crowd watched with their own eyes. The second preceptor, who was sitting on the palanquin, was torn into pieces by that terrifying power. As though he had self-exploded. His entire body exploded. Blood and flesh splattered all over. This scene shocked everyone present as they trembled in fear, even their breathing became cautious. Second Judicial Officer. Second Judicial Officer was blown up just like that. Only small pieces of minced meat were left from the explosion. Furthermore, they didn't even see when Dmo Xian made his move. Too terrifying. The rumored overlord was simply too terrifying. Even the Linglong Palace Lord couldn't do anything to the overlord. Linglong Palace was finished. This time, Linglong Palace was really finished. Whereas at this moment, that ravishing young lady stood under the minced flesh, her expression didn't change as she shook her head helplessly. I've said it before, my Xian is protective, but he didn't listen. Look, he lost his life in vain. Everyone was so infuriated by Yi Qing Luo's shameless words that their faces contorted. This man's show-off was really complacent. What's so great about relying on a man? All right. Relying on an amazing man was really amazing. At least, it was impossible for them to rely on the overlord in this lifetime. Yi Qing Luo didn't bother about what those Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were thinking. Her line of sight turned and landed on the Linglong Palace Lord. Looking at the disheveled-looking Linglong Palace Lord who was staring at them vigilantly, Yi Qing Luo's pink lips curled upwards as she walked towards the Linglong Palace Lord, step by step. Her footsteps were very light and slow. Step by step, neither too fast nor too slow. There was no sound at all. But as the young lady lifted her footsteps, the hearts of the Linglong Palace Lord's female disciples were pounding furiously. This suffocating atmosphere. The Linglong Palace Master's heart tightened. She glared at the young girl who was walking towards her, her eyes filled with malice. What do you want to do? What do I want to do? Yi Qing Luo tilted her head as she laughed softly. All along, isn't it what you want to do? The face of the palace master of the Linglong Palace was slightly pale. She raised her head slightly and said, I underestimated the strength of a venerable sovereign. I am not as skilled as you. You can kill me or torture me if you want. His tone was very arrogant. Kill you? Yi Qing Luo shook her finger. Killing you, isn't it freeing you? I'm not that kind. When the Linglong Palace Master heard this, her serious face suddenly changed and her brows wrinkled. What do you mean? Doesn't Lord Hall Master know very well what I mean? Yi Qing Luo had already walked in front of her, merely 3 steps away. If I didn't guess wrongly, to become the Palace Master of Linglong Palace, what you have to sacrifice is your own freedom. She tilted her head again, as though she was in deep thoughts as she smiled. So, how could I let you die? Following her words, every single word was spilled out. The expression on the Ling Long Palace Master's face kept changing. Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but laughed as her narrow eyes curved. Chapter 4155. Yi Qing Luo's eyes were slightly suffused with a faint chill. When her long and narrow eyes were raised, the corner of her eyes outlined a blossoming flame. That smile was breathtakingly beautiful. But in the eyes of the Ling Long Palace Master, he looked like an Azura who had crawled out of hell. Every single smile and frown revealed a chill that caused one's entire body to go cold. The Ling Long Palace Lord had never encountered such a pressing pressure before. Even earlier, when he met Dmo Xian's icy sharp black eyes, he did not have such a feeling. Fear unconsciously seeped out of her eyes. When he spoke, even his voice trembled slightly. You. What do you want to do? Yi Qing Luo's eyes narrowed as she looked at her disdainfully. What do you think I want to do? The Ling Long Palace Master pursed her lips and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She did not answer. He clenched his fists tightly. He felt humiliated. Yi Qing Luo intentionally paused for a moment, admiring the Ling Long Palace Lord's icy cold face, revealing such an embarrassed expression. She said nothing. Invisibly, it created even more pressure on the palace master of the Ling Long Palace. The pupils of the Ling Long Palace's hall master rapidly contracted. It was as if a hurricane was about to burst out of her eyes. Yi Qing Luo then parted her lips slightly and said word by word, "What is the purpose of Ling Long Palace's existence? You, and the so-called mysterious fairy, why do you exist?" Because her body was suitable, she was forced to become the next palace master of the Ling Long Palace. It sounded extremely ridiculous. In the Ling Long Palace, he needed to find a compatible body. There must be some sort of motive or reason behind this. Hearing Yi Qing Luo's question, Ling Long Palace Lord's expression froze for a moment. I don't know what you're talking about. Since you want to die so badly, you might as well tell me about it. If I'm happy, I can fulfill your wish, right? Yi Qing Luo opened her mouth with a smile as her slender fingers gently caressed her lips. He looked as if he was really helping the Ling Long Palace Master out of kindness. The muscles on the face of the Ling Long Palace Lord trembled slightly. What did he mean by letting her get what she wanted? If they could, who would want to die? If he really wanted to die, how could he have endured in the Ling Long Palace for so many years? Even though he was the Ling Long Palace Lord, he did not have any freedom and he could not seek death. However, if a person really wanted to die, there were thousands of ways to do so. Moreover, the Ling Long Palace Lord would want her to inherit the position of the next Ling Long Palace Lord in exchange for her freedom. This meant that she did not want to die at all. For a person who longed for freedom, but did not dare to, and was unwilling to die, the only way was to follow her psychological line of defense and infiltrate bit by bit. What do you think? Has Hall Master considered it? Yi Qing Luo asked with a beaming smile. That Lord Hall Master was filled with mockery. The Ling Long Palace Lord's fists were tightly clenched, and her 5 fingers were tightly interlocked together. A pair of venomous eyes seemed to be filled with ice. Her entire body tensed up, as if squeezing each word out from the gaps of her teeth. She said through gritted teeth, "What do you want to know?" Yi Qing Luo's smile deepened as she lowered her body slightly. That gorgeous face was magnified in the Ling Long Palace Lord's pupils. She smiled sweetly, the reason for the existence of the Ling Long Palace, and the standard of the body that you have your eyes on. Chapter 4156. The Ling Long Palace Master did not respond. With a sunken face, he exchanged glances with Yi Qing Luo. The storm in his eyes seemed like it was about to explode. Don't want to say it? Yi Qing Luo raised her eyebrows and dragged out the last syllable, huh? Miss Yi. At that moment, the voice of the great judge was heard. Everyone's attention was drawn to her. The great judge took a careful look at Dmo Xian before opening his mouth to speak. Miss Yi, Isn't the purpose of Linglong Palace's existence to maintain the balance of the Earth realm? If Miss Yi is unwilling to become the Linglong Palace master, we won't force you. No. A furious roar suddenly rang out. Linglong Palace Lord's eyes were burning as he stared at Yi Qing Luo. It must be her. Why? The great judicial magistrate pursed his lips tightly. He really couldn't understand why the hall master insisted on making Yi Qing the next hall master. Especially in front of his majesty, this was no different from courting death. What was the palace master persevering for? It wasn't just the Grand Inquisitor's doubts. This was also the doubt in the hearts of many disciples of the Linglong Palace. Lady Yi, the Grand Judicial Magistrate's face turned pale as he looked at Yi Qing Luo, racking his brains to think of a way to help the Linglong Palace Lord escape. This was not because she valued the Linglong Palace Lord. Instead, the moment something happens to the Linglong Palace Master, everyone they interact with will be blamed. The Overlord would definitely be furious for the sake of the beauty. Yi Qing Luo didn't even cast a glance at the Grand Magistrate. The smile on his lips had yet to dissipate. On the contrary, it added a treacherous arc. However, amidst the treachery, her smile became extremely sweet. What if it has to be me? It seems that Lord Palace Master does not intend to have a proper discussion with me. The storm gathering in the eyes of the Linglong Palace Lord had already turned extremely dark. It was as if he had been forced into a corner. His 5 fingers tightened. His figure was swift as he broke through the raging waves around him. Bringing along the piercingly cold profound wave, he approached Yi Qing Luo in an aggressive manner. This action of the Linglong Palace Master was filled with the determination to die. She did not give herself any leeway at all. It was beyond everyone's expectations. After all, Di Zun was just there. Fighting in front of Di Zun? Was he tired of living? But it happened. The Palace Lord of the Linglong Palace did exactly that. Not only that, she had succeeded. In front of the Overlord, he had successfully pushed his palm towards Yi Qing Luo. That palm strike was completely different from the Linglong Palace Master's strength. Instead, it was a kind of terrifying power that was close to destroying the heavens and extinguishing the earth. Yi Qing Luo's eyes sunk. He blinked his eyes in a certain direction. He quickly flipped over. Perhaps the blink of an eye had delayed him for a moment. Her figure seemed to have been sent flying by the majestic aura. The slender figure spun a few rounds in the air. Under everyone's gaze, 2 figures flew up at the same time, following the direction of the young girl. His purple robe fluttered in the wind, and his style was peerless. His black robe fluttered in the wind, and his evil aura was awe-inspiring. But the 2 of them moved at the same time, but they were not as fast as the Linglong Palace Master. Just as the 2 of them flew up at the same time, the young girl's body fell into the hands of the Linglong Palace's Palace Master. The surroundings were filled with piercingly cold glints. The murderous aura charged towards the entire space. Yi Qing Luo's shoulder was tightly gripped by 5 icy cold fingers. Chapter 4157. Linglong Palace Lord didn't stop at all. She didn't even bother to look at Dmo Xian and the Palace Lord who had already rushed over. Violent energy vibrated in the air. Profound ripples surged, blocking the path of the 2. When she raised her eyes again, Linglong Palace Lord and the young lady's figures had completely disappeared from everyone's eyes. Yi Qing Luo. Palace Lord's pupils constricted as he turned his head and stared at Dmo Xian, an overlord. You can't even protect your own woman? Dmo Xian's gaze didn't even look at him as his deep as ink eyes stared unblinkingly at the direction where Linglong Palace Lord and Yi Qing Luo had disappeared. There was no response. The anxious Palace Lord's eyes were covered with a layer of cold intent. Dmo Xian. He had just finished his shout. A purple afterimage flashed past her eyes. Dmo Xian's figure had already disappeared. Beside her ear, there was a man's icy cold voice which was blown by the wind into Palace Lord's ears. you also know that she is this lord's woman? The palace master of the Netherworld Palace froze on the spot. Yi Qing Luo only felt a wave of light surging in front of her. The howling cold wind was like a bone scraping, fiercely blowing against her face. Everything in front of her was covered by a patch of black. She could only faintly see that surging silvery light not far ahead. As she got nearer to the direction of the surging, that hand on her shoulder was clasping harder and harder. Linglong Palace Lord seemed as though she wanted to crush her bones completely. The distance between the two of them was separated by a robe. Yi Qing Luo could clearly feel the nervousness from Linglong Palace Lord, as well as the fear that arose from the bottom of her heart. Yes, fear. Yi Qing Luo's lips unconsciously lifted. But moments later, Linglong Palace Lord had already brought her to their destination. What entered her eyes was a patch of empty beautiful pitch black. The most eye-catching thing was that in that pitch black, there was an obvious shape of a huge black hole. That black hole was in the shape of a vortex. As though it was in the darkness, a huge bloody mouth was opened. It was as if it wanted to devour everything in the world. He just stared at the huge black hole. Yi Qing Luo felt a strong sense of discomfort. It was as if some sort of heavy energy was constantly seeping out of the black hole, suppressing the surrounding space. No, I don't know if it's an illusion. He had a feeling that this black hole was about to burst out and suppress everything in the world. Yi Qing Luo's mind had just flashed past this thought. All of a sudden, the palace master of the Linglong Palace gave her a forceful push and retreated to the front of the gigantic black hole. Yi Qing Luo staggered a little and finally stabilized her footsteps. However, the Linglong Palace's palace master closed in on her again and pushed her into the black hole. As she neared the black hole, Yi Qing Luo felt a chill down her spine. Something cold pressed against her face. That touch, sticky and cold. It was so cold that it made one's hair stand on end. It was even more horrifying than having a poisonous snake crawling on his face. Yi Qing Luo's brows twitched. He subconsciously wanted to reach out and grab the thing on his face. But in the next instant, that cold and sticky thing stuck to her hands again. Both her hands were tightly confined, totally unable to move. That disgusting feeling made Yi Qing Luo's goosebumps all over. Chapter 4158. Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes, trying to adapt to the scene in front of her. But, no matter how she looked around, the surroundings were still in darkness. She felt as if she was trapped in a boundless black fog. She couldn't see her fingers in front of her. Even the night vision eyes that he usually used were useless. At this moment, it had no effect at all. What on earth was going on? Just as she was pondering over it, her four limbs had been entangled with a sticky cold thing. It completely confined her, making her unable to move. Suddenly, Linglong Palace Lord's trembling voice was heard, "My lord, this is the next successor of Linglong Palace Lord whom you have set your eyes on." Linglong Palace Lord's tone was filled with fear and cautiousness. "My lord?" Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes. So, the thing in this black hole was the person whom Linglong Palace Lord was loyal to? Could it be this sticky cold thing that was entangled on her body? Was it created by that, my lord? Yi Qing Luo's emotions were in a whirl. But on her face, there was no change in her emotions. She was just about to find out what was hidden in this pitch-black surroundings. Suddenly, an ice-cold feeling, as if it was glued to her body, caused her to have goosebumps, and a voice that made her hair stand on end, rang in her ears. "Well done." It was just 4 words. But it made Yi Qing Luo's heart lifted. This voice. It seemed to be beside her ears. But if she listened carefully. But it seemed to be in a faraway direction. The tremors continued to reverberate in his ears. Not only was she unable to differentiate the other party's location, even the sound was unable to differentiate the direction. Danger. Outside the black hole, Linglong Palace Lord's voice rang once again, "My lord, I have already found someone to replace me. My lord had once promised me." Speaking to this point, Linglong Palace Lord's voice quivered, as though she was trembling, as though she was in fear. But, after the quivering, as though it was for her own future, she mustered up her courage and continued, "My lord had once promised me to return me my freedom." Slave? The person behind Linglong Palace Lord actually called himself a slave? To the person hiding in the black hole, Linglong Palace, was it just a slave farm of TA? "Of course, I won't go back on my word." That cold and sticky voice sounded emotionlessly. This made the Linglong Palace master kneel on the ground in excitement. "My lord is wise." As soon as the Linglong Palace Lord's voice fell, suddenly, a blood-curdling scream was heard. Immediately following that, Yi Qing Luo's eyes suddenly lit up with silver light. The light was faint. But under this boundless darkness, there was no end in sight. At this moment, Yi Qing Luo saw clearly the scene in front of her. Under the boundless black sky, in all directions, there were strands and strands that looked like a net made of blood and bones. It was like a dense spider web. The blood bones were still dripping with sticky blood. But what shocked Yi Qing Luo the most was, not far ahead, there was a human figure in the bloody bones. As the silver light moved, the person's face was clearly illuminated. It was the palace master of the Linglong Palace. She was entwined in the bloody bones, as though she was firmly attached to the bloody bones. It was exceptionally disgusting and horrifying. Linglong Palace Lord was still screaming miserably, heart-wrenching. Chapter 41-59. That sticky icy cold voice laughed sinisterly. "Since when did this god lie to you? You want freedom. Death, isn't that the biggest freedom? No. No. I don't want to die. I don't want to die." Linglong Palace Lord's eyes widened in terror, trying to struggle. But how could she break free from the densely packed bloody bones that were imprisoning her all over her body? The more she struggled, the more the blood bones embedded into her body, as though her entire being was sucked into her blood bones. Linglong Palace Lord's expression, in the midst of her struggle, gradually became extremely twisted and horrifying. She even bared her fangs and brandished her claws towards Yi Qing Luo, hoping that Yi Qing Luo could save her. "In front of this god, you still dare to call yourself I? Have you forgotten the rules which this god had set for you?" The icy cold voice was mixed with anger. "You deserve to be punished." These two words had just ended. Yi Qing Luo heard Linglong Palace Lord's heart-wrenching scream. Following that, a faint silvery light enveloped her. Yi Qing Luo saw Linglong Palace Lord's body was slowly absorbed by the blood bones. Until the very end, that face which was filled with fear, pain, malevolence, distorted various expressions, was also sucked into the blood bones. Yi Qing Luo totally didn't see clearly. How did that blood bones suck such a huge person like Linglong Palace Lord into a blood bone which was only as thick as an arm? She only knew. Linglong Palace Lord slowly became smaller in front of her eyes, and finally turned into nothingness. But Linglong Palace Lord's agonizing screams continued to ring beside her ears. The instance when Linglong Palace Lord disappeared, the silver light in the surroundings also suddenly dissipated. In front of her eyes, it turned into a patch of pitch darkness where she couldn't even see her own fingers in front of her. The densely packed blood bones which spread across the entire space also disappeared into the darkness. But that scene had already been firmly engraved in Yi Qing Luo's mind. Following the descent of darkness, Yi Qing Luo's heart thumped hard. The scene of Linglong Palace Lord being swallowed earlier kept replaying in her mind. Now, the thing which stuck onto her body, the thing which confined her, was that blood bone which saw earlier. That blood bone was something which sucked human flesh and blood. So, she was now imprisoned by the blood bone, in other words, he would become food for Shuigu? No, that's not right. This thought flashed past Yiqing Luo's mind. But it was instantly denied. If he was not wrong, the reason for the existence of the Linglong Palace should be because of the lord that the Linglong Palace master mentioned. Lao Lai and the palace master of the Dark Palace had also mentioned it. The Linglong Palace was a place to find a body that was compatible with the body. The so-called Empyrean fairy was just a puppet that he had raised. Yiqing Luo's eyes immediately sunk. It looked like the Linglong Palace master had taken a liking to her and wanted her to become the next palace master. It should be, the owner of the blood bone, which was also the meaning of the lord that the Linglong Palace master had mentioned. The owner of the blood bone had taken a fancy to her body. Therefore, it would not easily devour her. Little girl, this god knows. You saw it. Suddenly, a cold voice drifted into his ears. It was as if the voice beside his ears was sticky and slippery. It made one's hair stand on end. Don't worry, as long as you listen obediently, this god will not do anything to you. That voice sounded like a weird uncle who was pinching his throat and coaxing a child. It was extremely ear-piercing. Chapter 4160. Before saying the word, rest assured. Could he take back the blood and bones around her before saying those two words? Was there any credibility? Before you appeared, that slave, wasn't she living well? Seemingly sensing Yiqing Luo's distrust, the gloomy voice spoke again. So to say, as long as someone appears to replace me, I will be the next one? Yiqing Luo couldn't help but laugh when she heard that. The owner of this blood bone was really interesting. In front of her, he sucked the Linglong Palace Lord dry. And now he even used the Linglong Palace Lord as an example. Was this a threat? Or a threat? Based on your aptitude. In a short period of time, there is no one who can replace you. That gloomy voice laughed coldly. Yiqing Luo's lips twitched as she was filled with ridicule. Then in the end, I will still be replaced, isn't it? If you don't want to be replaced, then work hard to become a good slave. The gloomy voice sounded as though it was a matter of course. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes slightly, as she slowly relaxed her body and emotions, as she replied, I have never been a slave before. If there isn't any benefit that is enough to attract me, then I will be very unwilling. That's right. That voice spoke confidently, you have the honor to become this god's slave, is this not enough to attract you? Become the Linglong Palace Lord and the entire Linglong Palace will be yours. I really can't attract you, I don't even know who you are. Yiqing Luo replied indifferently, I don't have much interest in the Linglong Palace. Her tone was obviously filled with a sense of probing. Not knowing if that person didn't hear it or was too confident of himself. But his reply was very straightforward, this god is the God Realm Supreme God. God Realm? Supreme God? What the hell? Yiqing Luo expressed a dazed look, with a blank look. Yiqing Luo's reaction obviously didn't satisfy the owner of the blood bone's pride as the other party's tone suddenly became heavier, God Realm. This god is the God Realm Supreme God. Yiqing Luo's eyelashes fluttered as an undetectable cold arc flashed past her eyes. This small reaction made Yiqing Luo easily guess the other party's character. It was obvious that he had always been proud of his family's status. In his eyes, he was the god who ruled over all things in the world, and everyone else was just slaves and trash in his eyes. There wasn't much change on Yiqing Luo's face as she pretended to be puzzled. Divine Realm. You mean, the divine realm of the upper realm? Are there really gods in the God Realm? How could a god appear in the land and hide behind the Linglong Palace? After asking a few questions, Yiqing Luo seemed as though she couldn't even convince herself as she clicked her tongue, I don't believe you. As expected, the blood bones wrapped around his body tightened their grip. It was the feeling of forcibly stabbing into her flesh. The blood bone was sharp, as if it wanted to fuse with her flesh. A lowly slave like you dares to question this god's words? The cold and sticky voice suddenly became cold and treacherous. Yiqing Luo was in so much pain that her entire body felt like it was being dismembered and her forehead was oozing with cold sweat. Why can't I doubt you? If what you said is true, how could you have such a big reaction? Chapter 4161. The God Realm naturally has a god, otherwise why would it be called the God Realm? The gloomy and sticky voice sneered, this god is the supreme god that everyone in the God Realm revered. Isn't it your honor that this god has taken a fancy to you? In the future, if you can live to the extent that this god can't bear to kill you, this god can bring you back to the God Realm, and let you step onto the altar. That tone was filled with arrogance and complacency. The tone was filled with charity. Yiqing Luo still had no expression on her face. She was secretly calculating that person's words. She could tell. That person's arrogance came from his bones. It didn't seem like he was lying. God Realm. Supreme God. This was indeed an irresistible temptation of the EMO. After all, which cultivator in the world didn't want to step into the God Realm? Didn't want to become a god? The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and there was a faint flash of light in her eyes. This light didn't avoid the owner of the blood bones. That person thought that Yiqing Luo was moved, and continued in a gloomy and cold voice, as for why this god is in the Earth Realm, this point, as long as you are willing to be my slave, you will naturally know. The words had reached this point. Yiqing Luo also knew that there was no way to find out more information from that person's mouth. Currently she could confirm a few points. The other party came from the God Realm, and his status was noble, the supreme god of the God Realm. The reason why he was in the Earth Realm was unknown. But the only thing she could be sure of was that the other party needed a powerful cultivator, or a special human's flesh and blood to maintain his power. Or, like the former King of Darkness, he needed to break the seal. Densely packed blood bones. And it could directly suck people and swallow them. When it sucked people, the surroundings emitted a faint silver light. It was a little strange. If she wanted to confirm what the supreme god of the God Realm needed, the reason why it was compatible with a certain power body. Only by finding the similarities between the three mysterious fairies and the previous mysterious fairies. Young lady, this god is not asking for your opinion. You are the body that this god has taken a fancy to, you can't escape. The gloomy and cold voice was like a venomous snake, even the blood bones that were embedded into the flesh became more entangled. When the blood bone fused with her flesh and blood, Yiqing Luo felt that there was something in her body which was swiftly draining away. Yiqing Luo's eyes turned cold. All the dark force in his body burst forth. The thick and vigorous energy swept through the surrounding air, stirring up fiercely. Although she couldn't break free from the man's grip, she was still able to resist. However, it also made the blood bone loosen its grip a little. The feeling of something being drained from his body also disappeared in an instant. Yiqing Luo's complexion was slightly pale and her pupils were extremely sharp. Little girl, you want to resist me? The sticky voice was mixed with a hoarse sneer, like a sharp saw that was rubbing against each other. If it weren't for the worry of breaking your new slave, this god would really like to see how far you can resist. His tone was filled with excitement and madness. Yiqing Luo's fingers clenched tightly. The profound phoenix ring on his fingertip left a deep mark on his skin. Suddenly, the profound phoenix ring heated up. Yiqing Luo's eyes lit up and the expression on her face also became gentle. Slave, obediently inherit the Ling Long Palace and become the lord of the Ling Long Palace. As for the follow-up mission, this god will issue it to you. The gloomy voice didn't seem to sense the change in Yiqing Luo's emotions. Chapter 4162. After finishing this sentence, Yiqing Luo then felt the blood bone wrapping around her body, pushing her bit by bit towards a certain direction. In the darkness, Yiqing Luo couldn't see the direction she was being pushed towards. But she could roughly guess. The other party was trying to push her away from this black hole. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed slightly. If she left this black hole now, everything he had done just now would be for naught. Yiqing Luo's fingertips clenched tightly. He could feel the profound phoenix ring embedded in his finger. Her lips curled as her voice suddenly became ridiculing and disdainful. "Senior, aren't you a little too impatient? I've never agreed to be your slave." That pushing force suddenly paused, as the gloomy cold voice became hurried and ruthless. "Young lady, you don't have the right to choose. Everything you've said is merely your side of the story." Yiqing Luo sneered. "You don't even dare to show your real face, and only know how to hide like a dark rat. If I let you be my slave, I would despise you for being a coward." Her words were filled with ridicule. "How dare you be so rude in front of this god?" That gloomy and sticky voice suddenly exploded with rage, as though it couldn't control its own emotions. That originally loose blood bone once again gathered together. Beside her ear was the cold and ruthless voice of the master of the blood bone. "Do you really think this god can't bear to kill you?" Perhaps the other party had never experienced such a situation before, and had never suffered such disrespectful treatment. That voice sounded even more gloomy and cold. When the blood bone was deeply embedded, Yiqing Luo felt that the blood bone was like a huge suction cup, sucking on her body. That feeling of something being drained from her body struck her once again. What this god is interested in is merely this body which can bear this god's power. After obtaining your body, whether you live or die is not important. The master of the blood bone laughed cruelly. "This god doesn't have to have you. Don't think too highly of yourself." Yiqing Luo had a feeling of being placed in an ice cellar. Her 4 limbs were entangled with no way to struggle. She could only allow the coldness to corrode her body and mind. And that feeling of something being drained continuously. She took a deep breath and suppressed the pain. Word by word, he spat out from between his slightly pale teeth, "If you want my body, you can try." The provocative words enraged the owner of the blood bone. The powerful dark light quickly filled the entire space. Intertwining with those sharp blood bones made Yiqing Luo feel even more pain. Just then, suddenly, an extremely faint stream of light appeared in the air. Immediately after, Yiqing Luo felt a gush of warmth enveloping her. The sensation that was tightly attached to her body also left her body. What replaced it was a thick and warm chest. The man's clear and melodious voice, like the babbling of flowing water, faintly sounded. Body? Who is it?" That cold voice roared. All around, one could hear the rustling sound of the densely packed bloody bones scurrying about. Although Yiqing Luo couldn't see who it was. However, the elegant scent of sandalwood made her feel at ease. He instantly recognized the man who had rushed over. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a smile. From feeling the aura from the profound phoenix ring, Yiqing Luo knew that her Xian had arrived. Yes. Chapter 4163. At that moment, Yiqing Luo specially took a look at Dmo Xian. It was to pass on her own plan. Only when she was brought away by the Linglong Palace Lord would she be able to find out the real motive of the Linglong Palace Lord and from there lead out the mastermind. As long as she knew who the mastermind was, everything would be much easier to settle. As long as there were no accidents. The profound phoenix ring and profound dragon ring's connection could totally allow Dmo Xian to follow the aura to find her. Just one gaze had explained so many things. Luckily, she and Dmo Xian had a tacit understanding. Dmo Xian hugged the young lady's slender body tightly as his chilly peach blossom eyes swept across the boundless darkness. His gaze turned colder by several degrees. With a wave of his sleeves, a strong wind blew out. Profound energy pervaded every corner of the surroundings. Yiqing Luo suddenly felt her eyes lighting up. She immediately raised her little head from Dmo Xian's embrace. She saw the man's floating profound energy spreading out, and wherever it went, it blew away pieces of pitch black like ink. Just like sunlight, chasing away all the darkness. The surrounding scenery became clearer bit by bit. The space under the illumination was not like the faint glow which was emitted when the blood bones swallowed the Ling Long Palace Lord. Yi Qing Luo could see the horrifying scene around her even more clearly. The blood bones, which were dripping with blood, were like a spider web, spreading across the entire space. Other than the position where Dmo Xian was hugging her, the surrounding 2 steps radius, the rest of the space, were all covered. And what made Yi Qing Luo most shocked was, in the middle of the sky full of blood bones, hung a head. A man's head. His age was around 40 or so, with handsome features. She could tell that he was a handsome man when he was young. That head's eyes stared straight at their direction. Who are you? How dare you trespass into this god's territory? That head's mouth opened and closed. That voice was exactly the same as the icy cold and sticky feeling which Yi Qing Luo heard earlier. It's him. This head was the owner of the blood bones? The mastermind behind Ling Long Palace? Why would he have such an image? As though sensing Yi Qing Luo's gaze, that head looked towards her with a sinister look. Young lady, it's you. These are the reinforcements you've brought? His tone was full of ridicule. Naive. I am a supreme god of the divine world. How dare you, a bunch of ants, try to contend against me? The head's voice fell. The blood bones from all directions quickly gathered towards the 2 of them. But before he could get within 2 steps of the 2 of them, the densely packed bloody bones seemed to be blocked by something, and all of them piled up in the air. One bloody bone after another, one after another. They surrounded the 2 of them, almost forming a wall. Yi Qing Luo couldn't help but shiver. Although the blood bones couldn't get close to her. But seeing so many bloody bones piled up in front of him, just the thought of it gave him goosebumps. Dmo Xian naturally felt the slight tremble of the person in his arms. His eyes darkened. He opened his palm and gently stroked the girl's slender back. The thick palm and the scorching temperature soothed the discomfort in the girl's heart. The sleeve of his other hand fluttered. Ka, cha, rumble, a vast aura suddenly exploded. The majestic profound energy rushed against the blood bones. Chapter 4164. You, who exactly are you? The expression on the head's face was twisted to the point where it couldn't be any more twisted. It was hideous and terrifying. There was a hint of disbelief in his cold eyes. The man in front of him was dressed in a purple robe like flowing clouds, unparalleled and peerless. That pair of inky black eyes were pitch black. His gaze was calm, without any extra emotions. But just one look and a feeling of fear and awe rose from the bottom of his heart. Awe. When had he ever had such a feeling? He was the high and mighty god of the god realm, how could he be in awe of anyone? But, he was very clear. This man, just a casual lift of his hand and he was able to completely break his indestructible blood bones. His strength was absolutely not weak. Who was this man? Blood-bone barbaric king? The man opened his thin lips slightly and spat out these 4 words, which made the expression on the head completely stiffen. The head's shocked and incredulous expression had been replaced by a gloomy ruthlessness. His eyes were covered with a layer of frost. The ice-sealed sharp gaze seemed to turn into a sharp blade and cut the opponent's heart. Who are you? Why do you know this god's name? His sticky voice was even colder. Dmo Xian replied indifferently. I once heard that the blood-bone barbaric king privately used the divine body as nourishment to extend his life and enhance his own strength. This caused chaos in the god realm. The emperor of the god emperor sent an army to suppress it, but they became nourishment for the blood-bone barbaric king and were completely annihilated. Following Dmo Xian's words, that head's expression became more and more gloomy. In the end, his entire head hung low. His long hair hung loosely at the side of his body, concealing his emotions. But it could be seen. Because of Dmo Xian's words, he recalled the past that had long been buried in the deepest part of his heart, unwilling to dig out. But suddenly, Dmo Xian took another turn. After the army was annihilated, the Emperor of the God Emperor personally went into battle and annihilated you. Annihilated? That meant he didn't even have the chance to reincarnate. Yi Qing Luo was puzzled. If the blood-bone barbaric king was really annihilated, how could he possibly appear in the Earth realm? Could it be that the Divine Emperor did not really kill the blood-bone barbarian king? And after the Divine Emperor passed away, the blood-bone barbarian king quietly escaped? No, this isn't right. How could the Divine Emperor make such a mistake if he personally took action? The Divine Emperor would have personally confirmed that the blood-bone barbarian king had been annihilated. Under the eyes of the Divine Emperor, the blood-bone barbarian king had no choice but to secretly do something like this. Heh. I didn't expect that after tens of thousands of years, someone would still remember me. That head. No, it should be called the barbaric blood-bone king now. He laughed sinisterly, his face filled with ridicule. You are someone from the god realm? No. Dmo Xian glanced at him indifferently. Barbaric blood-bone king, you built the Ling Long Palace in the Earth realm and controlled the entire Earth realm. Your motive is to reappear in the world, right? Ha, ha ha. The barbaric blood-bone king laughed loudly, but in his laughter, there was a chilling intent. Reappear in the world? This god's biggest motive is. This god wants to attack back into the god realm and let that bastard have a taste of all the pain this god had suffered. Attack back into the god realm? Chapter 4165. Was the barbaric blood king sure that he was not joking? God realm. That was the god realm. Was it something that could be attacked as one wished? Could it be that he had stayed in the dark for too long and his brain had rusted? You want to seek revenge from the sovereign of god emperors? Dmo Xian could hear the hatred in the barbaric blood king's words. The barbaric blood king sneered as his blood bones started to make a cracking sound. Yes. This god wants to trample that bastard under my feet. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes slightly. The barbaric blood king's reaction was obviously too intense. This kind of hatred was not only because he had been defeated by the sovereign of god emperors. It looked like the former sovereign of god emperors and the barbaric blood king must have had a past. Before Yi Qing Luo could imagine a big piece of melodramatic story in her mind. The man's low and indifferent voice came into her ears. Perhaps, your expectations are going to be disappointed. The barbaric blood king's expression suddenly sunk. What do you mean? The sovereign of god emperors had already passed away not long after you turned into ashes. Dmo Xian said. As soon as these words left his mouth, the expression on the face of the head embedded in the bloody bones seemed to freeze. After a few breaths of time, he suddenly looked at Dmo Xian. His eyes were filled with anxiety and disbelief. How could she? How could she? The long hair on the head was also swaying because of the agitation. The densely packed skeletons in the surroundings continuously let out intense cracking sounds. You are lying to this god. She is the sovereign of god emperors and has the ability to live forever. How could she have passed away? Dmo Xian's expression was still indifferent. No one knows what happened 10,000 years ago, but the sovereign of god emperors has passed away. It is indeed a fact. The barbaric blood king's eyes froze bit by bit and finally fixed on an expression. His mood looked a little dejected, with an indescribable feeling. The entire space fell into silence once again. The barbaric blood king did not say a word for a long time. Yi Qing Luo was secretly thinking of a big wave of melodramatic plot. Suddenly, she was knocked by Dmo Xian. Yi Qing Luo felt the pain and raised her head to glare at the man. However, she was met with the man's dark and serious gaze. Don't let your imagination run wild. The Emperor of the Divine Emperor has nothing to do with the barbaric bloodbone king. Yi Qing Luo's grumbling words were swallowed by the man's seriousness. She puffed up her cheeks, not understanding why Dmo Xian had suddenly turned so serious. Could it be because of the divine emperor? It could be seen that Dmo Xian had deep feelings for the emperor of god emperors. Kind of like respect. It was kind of like reverence. His feelings were complicated and Yi Qing Luo couldn't understand it. The two of them were whispering to each other. On the other side, the blood-bone barbarian king's chilly voice was bone-chilling. I don't believe it. I absolutely don't believe it. This deity will personally ascend to the divine realm and verify it. His voice sounded like he was on the verge of breaking down. He was on the verge of insanity. As soon as the roar ended, the skull which was embedded in the blood bone suddenly charged towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. The densely packed bones crashed against Dmo Xian's defensive shield which encircled him. That kind of ruthless feeling was as though he was going to stake his life on the line. That skull stopped in front of Yi Qing Luo at a close distance. When it was blocked by the transparent defensive shield, the entire face was twisted and sinister, its facial features were already deformed. Chapter 4166. The barbaric blood-bone king roared as its bones collided more violently. That momentum was as though it had lost its rationality. That frenzied look made Yi Qing Luo shocked. What's wrong with him? Yi Qing Luo looked at Dmo Xian. Although the barbaric blood-bone king was crazy. But Yi Qing Luo wasn't worried that the barbaric blood-bone king would break through Dmo Xian's protective shield. Dmo Xian's eyes glanced at her indifferently as his large palm stroked her hair comfortingly, anxious to verify the fact that the Emperor of God has passed away. Yi Qing Luo blinked her eyes. Don't feel that his persistence towards the Emperor of God is a little abnormal? Dmo Xian's hand on her head pressed her hard. Don't let your imagination run wild. No matter what feelings he has towards the Emperor of God, it has nothing to do with the Emperor of God. Yi Qing Luo raised her hand and grabbed his large palm. Her long and narrow eyes stared at his eyes with a smile yet not a smile. What are you looking at? Dmo Xian looked down. Yi Qing Luo grabbed his hand tightly as a suspicious expression appeared on her face. You seem to have a kind of complicated feelings towards the sovereign of God Emperor as compared to the barbaric blood king. Speaking of this, she squinted her eyes again. When you and the barbaric blood-bone king were talking, it sounded like you were like someone who knew the Emperor of God thousands of years ago. The slender fingers on the hand she held in her palms suddenly moved. Yi Qing Luo looked at his hand and raised her brows. Don't tell me you are really an old monster who has lived for thousands of years? She thought that she had lived for 2 lifetimes and being together with Dmo Xian was already considered as a sibling love. But now it seemed Dmo Xian had lived for many times longer than her in both lifetimes. 10,000 years old monster? Yi Qing Luo was shocked by this thought of hers. Her words, coupled with the messy expression on her face. Dmo Xian's face turned black. His large palm directly pressed on Yi Qing Luo's head. What kind of messy things are you thinking about in this brain of yours? This is a very serious deduction. Yi Qing Luo said seriously, I am seriously suspecting that you are thinking of gnawing on this little tender flower of mine. Dmo Xian's fingers suddenly changed direction. His slender, jade-like fingers held her chin. That peerless countenance suddenly came close to Yi Qing Luo. In the blink of an eye, the man's face, which was completely defenseless against her, enlarged. The fragrance of sandalwood filled the air. Yi Qing Luo's vision couldn't help but tremble. Her eyes stared unblinkingly at the man's approaching face. Then, his deep and magnetic voice floated into her ears. Don't tell me. I'm a person who has lived for tens of thousands of years, and you're planning to abandon me? It was obviously the kind of pitiful and aggrieved words. But coming from the man's mouth, there was an inexplicable evil aura. It was very alluring. Yi Qing Luo couldn't hold it in any longer. Not abandoning, not abandoning. Even if you're a 10,000-year-old monster, I still love you. Dmo Xian narrowed his eyes. Huh? A 10,000-year-old monster? That N was deep and magnetic. Yiqing Luo's little heart melted for a moment. Look at that face, that voice. Which part of him looked like a person who had lived for 10,000 years? Cough, I don't mean that. What I mean is, even if you're really a person from 10,000 years ago, I won't despise you. Yiqing Luo's survival instinct was very strong as she immediately changed her words. Dmo Xian's thin lips only twitched. Chapter 4167. Yiqing Luo. She probably couldn't coax him well. Who knew that men were also very concerned about their own age? The two of them acted as though there was no one else around, openly displaying their affection. It even agitated the barbaric blood-bone king. The sinister eyes on that head were bloodshot red. It showed the barbaric blood-bone king's raging emotions. Lad, do you really think this god can't do anything to you? The barbaric blood-bone king's sinister voice was like a sharp blade. His voice had just ended. Like a spiderweb, the bloody bones that intersected with each other suddenly surged. It was no longer like before, using the blood bones to charge around. But, one by one, the blood bones quickly gathered around the both of them. Tightly, those drops of blood on the blood bones started to drip down drop by drop. The thick blood dripped onto the transparent protective shield that Dmo Xian had conjured. In an instant, the surrounding shape was revealed. The transparent protective shield was dripping with large amounts of blood. The most important thing was that blood was like lava. After it floated on the protective shield, it would make a sizzling sound as it melted. But after a moment, the surroundings of the both of them were covered by a patch of red. Their ears were filled with that kind of melting sound. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly, her eyes were blood red. Is he planning to melt your barrier directly? Dmo Xian hugged her slender body tightly. I'm not too sure about the effects of the barbaric blood-bone king's blood bones. You follow closely. The word "I" had yet to leave her mouth. Suddenly, a piercingly cold wind struck. Yiqing Luo instantly felt a strong majestic pressure, pressing down from the top of her head. Her nose was filled with a thick smell of blood. And something dripped onto her body. The clothes that came into contact with it, with a sizzle sound, a big hole was melted. The protective shield was really melted by the blood. Yiqing Luo reacted swiftly, raised her hand to pull the sleeve which was dripping with blood, and tore it off. To prevent the blood, through the robe, from dripping onto her body. The protective shield was melted. Be careful. Dmo Xian speedily hugged Yiqing Luo tightly and stuffed her little body into his embrace. Yiqing Luo could hear it clearly. It was the sound of Shui Gu's blood dissolving Dmo Xian's robe. This blood, it could even dissolve Dmo Xian's enchantment. Not to mention human flesh and blood. Dmo Xian blocked it for her. What about himself? I'm fine, don't worry about me, think of a way to leave this place first. Yiqing Luo stuck her head out from his arms, her eyes filled with worry. He raised his head. She saw that the man's luxurious purple robe had already been melted by the blood, revealing a large area of his fair skin. Because he had been circling her tightly, she was unable to escape. The blood flowed along the melted robe and dripped onto his skin. In an instant, it melted and turned pitch black. Yiqing Luo could even feel the body of the man who was hugging her trembled slightly. Ah, Xian. Yiqing Luo's eyes turned red as she cried out urgently. His voice was choked with emotion. I can protect myself. I'm fine. The man's voice didn't have much fluctuation. His large palm pressed on her head and pushed her back into the room. Don't look. Ah, Xian. Yiqing Luo pursed her lips, her hands clutching his robe tightly. She wanted to struggle, but was afraid that her struggle would affect Dmo Xian. This silly man. Wouldn't she be worried if she didn't look? Chapter 4168. He didn't want her to get hurt. Did she want him to get hurt? Dmo Xian carried the person in his arms as he swiftly shifted his position. However, the barbarian blood-bone king had clearly anticipated this. Before the blood on the bones could dissolve everything, it had already used the blood on the bones to build solid walls of blood. It blocked Dmo Xian from all directions. Dmo Xian's sleeves fluttered. The majestic profound energy kept vibrating. But, there were just too many bones around. Even if it smashed the large piece of bones in front of him. Soon after, a new wall of blood appeared. Especially after the blood bones were broken. The blood that splashed out from the broken bone also scattered in all directions like a goddess scattering flowers. In such a situation, there was no way to break out of this space. Yiqing Luo had been pressed in the man's arms. Her face was plastered on his chest and her head couldn't move. Beside her ear was the man's steady and calm heartbeat. And the sound of blood dripping onto Dmo Xian's body. Yiqing Luo's hand which was clutching his robe tightened. Ah Xian. When you get hurt, my heart will ache too. Her voice was choked with sobs. Under this situation, Dmo Xian had been protecting her and was being melted by the blood. As time went on, this kind of melting would melt the entire person. Just at this moment, Dmo Xian's hands suddenly pressed on her body. Following that, she heard a heavy breathing. Yiqing Luo's heart trembled violently. She quickly glanced sideways. She saw the man's purple robe which was like flowing clouds had been completely melted. On his arm, there was a scar. Yiqing Luo stretched out her hand and grabbed his arm. Before she could open her mouth, her body suddenly felt a cold and sticky touch. Her body was suddenly lifted up by a force out of thin air. Following that, her four limbs were confined and unable to move. That sticky, like a poisonous snake, eroded her entire body. All of this. It happened too quickly. The barbaric blood king apparently saw through the feelings between them. He was deliberately using such a method to force the two of them to be distracted. Little Luo, Dmo Xian's eyes turned cold as he totally didn't care about the burnt mess on his body, as his figure speedily approached Yiqing Luo's direction. A large amount of blood dripped down. Dmo Xian completely ignored it. His eyes were fixed on the young girl who was being restrained by the barbaric bloodbone king. Although Yiqing Luo's four limbs couldn't move, but her mind and consciousness were still clear. Looking at the man's desperate appearance, she struggled even harder. At this moment, her eyes were already dyed with a seductive red. On his wrist, the azure dew bracelet that resembled a cherry blossom totem was also faintly flickering with a faint flowing light. Ah Xian, between his lips and teeth, he spat out a silent name. The expression on her face was also changing bit by bit. As for the blood-bone barbaric king who had already lost his rationality, he totally did not notice the change in Yiqing Luo. Seeing that Yiqing Luo had been restrained, he manipulated the blood bone to block Dmo Xian's path. Immediately after, it rushed towards Yiqing Luo impatiently. This body of yours, this god wants it. As soon as he finished speaking, Yiqing Luo felt that her body seemed to be squeezed into something. A strong and majestic sense of oppression. It made her body produce an intense rejection. But, that gush of energy was still surging into her body. It was like wanting to occupy her everything, to swallow her everything. What on earth was the barbaric blood king trying to do? Her body. Chapter 4169. Yiqing Luo's pupils constricted. Could it be? Blood-bone barbaric king wanted to take over her body? Dream on. Yiqing Luo's eyes turned cold. Her entire body shook. An inexplicable aura poured out. She only felt. Her own consciousness kept resisting against the energy that wanted to squeeze in. That inexplicable aura quickly wrapped around that power. Following that, Yiqing Luo's mind went blank. Her consciousness was lost for a moment. Ah, a miserable shriek was heard. A blood-colored figure was sent flying. Yiqing Luo felt her 4 limbs were loosened. She lost all support and fell from midair. A hand clasped her waist. He pulled her into his embrace. Yiqing Luo opened her eyes tiredly as she leaned into the man's arms, panting slightly. What's going on? She totally didn't know what was going on. At that moment, her mind went blank and she lost consciousness. Then she regained consciousness. Her body was so weak that there was no energy at all. She couldn't even gather her profound energy. You actually. Not waiting for Yiqing Luo to reply, that cold sharp voice rang from the side. Yiqing Luo turned her head in Dmo Xian's arms, seeing that disheveled skull embedded in the blood bones. But what shocked Yiqing Luo the most was, in all directions, the densely packed bones that were intertwining with each other began to break apart one by one. With a speed visible to the naked eye, they started to break. What was going on? Why did blood-bone barbaric kings suddenly become like this? Ah. Why is she in your body? It's actually you, it's you. Blood-bone barbaric king seemed to have seen something on Yiqing Luo as his eyes widened and his mouth kept screaming something. His shock and disbelief. Yiqing Luo totally couldn't understand. She wanted to ask. Above her head, the man's deep and indifferent voice floated down. She is not someone you can spy on. Blood-bone barbaric king shook his head. Impossible. Impossible. This god won't believe it. You are all lying to this god. This god absolutely won't believe it. He muttered softly. His expression was one of madness. Amidst the murmurs and roars, Yiqing Luo felt a resistance pushing Dmo Xian. Another blink of an eye. The densely packed and broken bones in front of him had already disappeared. In front of them, it was already bright. This was the Linglong Palace. The barbaric blood-bone king expelled them from his space. Yiqing Luo frowned slightly as she had many questions in her heart. However, he could not muster up any strength to sense the aura of the barbaric blood-bone king. Her body was so exhausted that she didn't have the chance to think. Well, take a break, I will be by your side. The man's gentle voice, close to the ear. In a trance, his thin lips planted a kiss between her eyebrows. It was very light, very faint, but it had a reassuring warmth. In the next moment, Yiqing Luo couldn't resist the exhaustion in her body and fell into a deep sleep. He could vaguely hear someone talking beside his ear. Her power is about to awaken. It's about time. By the time Yiqing Luo opened her eyes again, she was already lying on the soft big bed. What greeted her eyes was a piece of white gauze. Her long curly lashes fluttered as she woke up a little. Chapter 4170. This was an extremely luxurious and elegant room. The air was filled with the faint scent of sandalwood. It can make people calm down. This familiar and reassuring scent should have been prepared by Dmo Xian. He looked around. There was no one else in the house. She slowly got up. His limbs were weak. His body seemed to have been hollowed out by something. He couldn't muster up any strength in his body. She furrowed her brows. He just woke up after a nap. Why does my body feel so tired? Could it be from before? The Linglong Palace Lord wanted to forcibly take over her body, and this was the repercussions? Didn't the Linglong Palace master fail? Girl, you're finally awake. Old man Song's figure slowly floated out from the azure dew bracelet. He floated to the side of Yiqing Luo's bed, his eyes filled with worry. How is it? Do you feel any discomfort anywhere? Yiqing Luo shook her head. I just can't muster up the strength. I'm fine, I'll be fine after a few days of rest. Old Man Song heaved a sigh of relief. Yi Qing Luo looked at Old Man Song's expression and frowned even tighter. What's wrong? I'm fine. Old Man Song chuckled. Your current situation can be considered normal. When the Bloodbone Barbarian King tried to forcefully invade your body, it was repelled by the profound jade heart within your body as well as the power of the divine tool. Your body and soul have been affected during this process, which is why you are feeling so uncomfortable now. He explained in a relaxed tone. But Yi Qing Luo somehow felt that Old Man Song's words seemed to be hiding something. Yi Qing Luo pursed her lips but didn't probe further. She only nodded and asked, "Where's Xian?" Ling Long Palace Lord is dead, and the disciples of Ling Long Palace all thought that Ling Long Palace Lord was killed by the Overlord. Old Man Song saw Yi Qing Luo changing the topic and immediately replied. Then, he sighed. After all, the Ling Long Palace has a very good reputation in the land. Furthermore, it is the representative and symbol of the land. The death of the palace master of the Ling Long Palace will affect the entire land. Yi Qing Luo lowered her head. She knew this very well. Everyone was ambitious. The Earth domain was divided into 3 main cities. Each main city wanted to unify the entire Earth domain and establish itself as the king. The existence of the Ling Long Palace just happened to maintain the balance of the 3 main cities. Now that the Ling Long Palace had collapsed, those ambitious people in the land domain would definitely become restless. It would not be easy to resolve the matter regarding the Ling Long Palace. Even if Dmo Xian stepped forward, he might not be able to suppress those ambitious people. Right now, the Bloodbone Barbaric King has no intention of rebuilding the Ling Long Palace. I reckon that he won't appear in the Earth domain for a while. Even if he does appear, he won't be interested in the Ling Long Palace. Old Man Song saw the worry on Yi Qing Luo's face and comforted her. The Overlord naturally has his own considerations, you don't have to worry. Mentioning the Bloodbone Barbarian King, Yi Qing Luo recalled the frenzied look of the Bloodbone Barbarian King when he heard that the God Emperor had passed away. She seemed to have thought of something as she suddenly raised her head and looked at Old Man Song. How can you be so sure that the barbaric Bloodbone King has no interest in the Ling Long Palace? Listening to Old Man Song's words, it seemed that Old Man Song also knew the Bloodbone Barbarian King. Old Man Song was startled. Only then did he realize that he had let it slip. Just as he was about to change the topic, he saw Yi Qing Luo staring at him intently. You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.